Yeah, we are seeing a little bit of a change. With that 2% decline that you mentioned with CoreLogic, it's more of a headline figure, I guess. And I guess you can't just blindly follow those headline figures. There are certain subsections within Perth which actually are performing quite well. We actually have seen signs of recovery in quite a few markets throughout Perth. However, it has been a bit of a tough 4 years for us.
So there's some recovery, and is there some stabilisation? And what ends of the market are you seeing that?
Yeah, there is some stabilisation, mainly within our core sort of central sub-region. We're really seeing that. So REWA, the Real Estate Institute of WA, actually only just released some figures 2 days ago that we actually showed a positive growth rate for the month. So that's a little bit of a positive sign. But in terms of the actual subsections, it is our central subsection. So that's within about 15 kilometres of the Perth CBD, has been performing fairly strongly for the past year. We have actually seen growth of about 1 to 2%.
Now, you know, it's such a unique location, Perth. I mean, in over the eastern seaboard, we see a lot of flow on from Sydney to Brisbane to Melbourne with real estate markets, and you guys are really quite isolated in that way. But the Real Estate Institute of Western Australia showed some areas are selling faster with the downturn. It's got suburbs Butler, Duncraig, Armidale and Wembley. What do you think's fueling this?
Yeah, it's actually quite a mix of suburbs, those ones there. So we've got some that are about $300,000 average house price, and some like Wembley, which is upwards of $1 million. I guess the cheaper ones are more coming in through just general levels of affordability in the market. It's a good time to buy, to get your first home, for young investors to enter the market. So I guess that's where those areas are coming in. And then our upper area, we have a bit of a two-speed market, I guess, in Perth at the moment. So it's our upper areas, such as our western suburbs, which are our more expensive areas that are performing quite strongly and have really short days on market, shorter than, say, 20 days for some areas like Nedlands and Wembley. So those are definitely the areas that are responding quicker.
Well, let's have a look at the highest growth suburbs, and what is driving that growth?
Yep, so we're quite mining dependent here in WA. So I wouldn't say we're fully mining dependent, but we do definitely get a flow-on effect from up in the northwest. So we have seen some really good growth rates up in our northwest, in our more of our Pilbara area. Looking at areas such as like Karratha and Port Hedland, Karratha's shown good growth of about 20% over the last year or so, which is actually fantastic to see. And then that gets flowed on back down to Perth. So we're seeing a lot more exploration in the mining sector, a lot more money being spent, and then that's just bringing a general level of confidence to Perth. In terms of what's showing the growth rates in Perth, it is, like I said before, it's our top end suburbs. So it's that money that's funneling through, and more people are trying to get into the more aspirational areas, getting into our western suburbs, spending and buying their dream home. What we're hoping to see from that is a bit more of a ripple effect. So the ripple effect should hopefully start seeing the areas outside of those absolute premium areas getting some growth. When people miss out on those premium areas, they start looking for the next best substitute. They start looking for the areas that they can afford, that they can get into because they've competed for other properties. They've missed out, so they're having to move to the next ones. So that's where we're seeing the areas of growth, and hopefully where we should see some growth in the future.
It's funny, Sean, that you mentioned the western suburbs, because obviously it's the other side for us on the east coast, whereas your western suburbs, are they more your affluent suburbs because they're on the west of the city, which is obviously then more coastal?
Yeah, our western suburbs are the areas that we call between the city and our coast. So we have a beautiful coastline here in WA with the sun setting over it. So yes. Those areas definitely do get the premiums.
Now, when we talk about recovery and looking at places like Karratha, which had such a dip, and when you say, you know, it's recovering by as much as 20%, how much did it go down before it's coming back up? Just to give sort of a context of where the Perth and Western Australian market's been and where it might go from here.
Yeah, so in the northwest we did see quite a large drop. I mean, we were getting rents upwards of about $2,000 for a house, just a basic little 3x1 or a 4x2, and that dropped down to about $200 to $400. So that was a huge drop, which then did follow with some price drops as well. So we saw prices drop from upwards of $1 million down to about the 300,000 mark.
Now,
so
it's
quite a large drop.
Yeah, you point straight away to that rental market. Now, obviously for the real estate investor, that rental return is massive, and from the mining boom or the mining fall, the return, the prices went crazy and then went completely the opposite direction. So what do you think is happening with the rental market, and how are you seeing the trends? Are they stabilising, or how do you think that's going?
Yep, so up in the northwest we've definitely seen some stabilisation, and if anything some growth. In the Perth market specifically, we've seen stabilisation over the last, well, probably about the last 4 to 6 months, which has been good because we've seen quite a steep drop. We got to upwards of about $475 a week here in Perth. Now we've settled at about $350 a week. So we have seen a fair bit of a drop. However, we have seen it stabilise. The big picture to take away from it, the big point to take away from it is the fact that our vacancy rates are now at 3.9%. So they got upwards of 7.5% at one stage. So that's a really good trend, and a good trend that can follow. We actually saw that at a 3.9% vacancy rate only a few years ago, we're actually at a rental rate of $450 a week. So we can see that there should be some price growth there for the Perth rental market in the near future if these trends do continue.
Now, we've talked about the suburbs that are already on the rise. Which are the ones that you should be buying into now to kind of ride the upward wave?
Yep, so when we're looking at riding that upward wave, it is important that you do pick the right areas. We definitely do find that. As I said, it's not a complete growth across the board at the moment. So what we do look for is more areas that are going to benefit from a bit of private spending, a bit of public spending, really following where the money's going. If you can get that short-term driver of some good infrastructure boost, then that's where you can really ride that upturn, as well as get a good little bit of a boost from other sort of influencer. So in terms of areas, we'd be looking along potentially our new train line that we're looking at putting in. Metronet's quite large here in Perth. That's our big spend of upwards of $1 billion. So that's going to bring in some new train lines, and with that will bring good housing investment opportunities.
We see a drive for rental here, particularly for Sydney and Melbourne, the two larger capitals, due to population growth but also immigration. Do you see that affecting you a lot over there as well, with the occupancy rates dropping to the 3.9?
Yep, so probably the biggest picture there isn't necessarily our population growth, it's more of our supply tightening. So we've been quite laggy with bringing new buildings in. So we know that there's a bit of a construction lag. So what we can see is when we need the houses, it takes a couple of years to build them. You've got to get your approval, you then got to build it. So what we saw during our mining boom is we saw that we did have a real big shortage. So then what we brought in with that was we brought in a lot of construction. Unfortunately, that construction finished at the worst possible time. That's what brought in all of our supply for our rental market and with our housing market as well. But what we then saw was a bit more of a tightening. People weren't building, and we saw those construction approvals actually fall off a cliff. It's actually quite a large drop. And with that large drop, brought with it now a tightening of supply down the track. So it's not necessarily a population growth determinant, more of a supply determinant.
Right.
However, with mining increasing over here in Perth, it often does bring a lot more population in, and so we could have a bit more of a perfect storm type of situation with that population coming in and that supply pressure as well. So we can see some positives in the horizon for the Perth rental market, that's for sure.
And is there growth for Perth as a whole in terms of how much more can the city of Perth expand?
Yeah, with that, definitely. We can definitely expand a fair bit. I think during the mining boom, we were actually the same price as Melbourne for our average house price. So to put that in context, Melbourne is now roughly about 40% more expensive than us. So we do understand that we can actually, the prices can definitely go up. In terms of levels of affordability, Perth is one of the most affordable cities in all of Australia. We earn good wages over here, mainly built from the mining section, and then that's coupled with quite an affordable house price. So in general, levels of affordability in Perth are probably the best we've seen it since the mining construction boom.
What advice are you giving for the interstate buyers to get all of us bringing our wallets and over to enjoy your beautiful sun setting on the water over there?
Well, we are definitely seeing it. We've been talking to quite a fair few interstate investors actually at Momentum Wealth. We've been seeing a lot coming across, a lot of savvy investors who have made a fair bit of money from riding the Melbourne and the Sydney upturn, and are now looking at timing the market and coming across Perth. I guess my big advice for that would be, Perth won't necessarily go up as a complete whole. It is all about finding those right subsections, finding those short-term and those long-term drivers that are going to increase your investment and not just guarantee the fact that Perth's in the right time in the cycle. Definitely find the right areas and ride that up, and we're expecting some pretty good growth over the near future, that's for sure.